There is a moment that almost everyone reaches eventually, usually late at night, usually alone with their thoughts, when they finally stop and ask themselves the one question they have been avoiding for years. Am I actually living the life I want? Or am I just getting through the one I ended up with? If that question just made your chest tighten a little, stay with me for the next few minutes, because what you are about to hear changed the way an entire generation of people thought about second chances. For decades, one man built a career around a single, stubbornly simple idea. Your life does not get better by chance. It gets better by change. His name was Jim Rohn, and long before personal development was a multi-billion-dollar industry with podcasts and courses and hashtags, he was standing in front of rooms full of ordinary, tired, financially struggling people, telling them something that most of them had never heard from anyone else in their lives, that their past did not have veto power over their future. Rohn did not become one of the most quoted teachers in the history of self-improvement by telling people what they wanted to hear. He became legendary because he told people the truth, gently but firmly. And the truth was this: nobody is coming to rescue you from your own habits. Not the economy. Not your boss. Not a lucky break. You are the one who has to pick up the tools and start rebuilding. And the good news buried inside that hard truth is that if your daily choices got you into this situation, different daily choices can absolutely get you out of it. Maybe you are watching this because things did not go the way you planned. Maybe there were years you feel you cannot get back. Relationships that ended badly. A career that stalled. Money that disappeared faster than it arrived. Or simply a slow, quiet drift away from the person you always meant to become. Rohn had an answer for that feeling too. And it is one of the gentlest and most powerful things he ever taught. Your past is a chapter, he would say, not the whole book. You cannot rewrite yesterday. But today has not been written yet, and you are the one holding the pen. What made Rohn different from so many motivational voices was that he never sold shortcuts because he did not believe in them. He built his entire philosophy on something almost old-fashioned in its honesty. Ordinary actions, repeated consistently over time, produce extraordinary results. Not luck. Not talent alone. Not a single dramatic turning point. Just the quiet, unglamorous discipline of showing up for yourself day after day, especially on the days you do not feel like it. In the next few minutes, we're going to walk through exactly what Jim Rohn taught about rebuilding a life that feels like it has gotten off track. How he thought about failure, about discipline, about time, about the identity you are quietly building with every choice you make, and about the single decision that, according to him, changes everything the moment you actually make it. Not the decision to change someday. The decision to begin again, starting now. If any part of this resonates with where you are right now, I would genuinely love to hear it. Drop a comment and tell me what chapter of your life you are ready to close, because I read every single one, and there is something powerful about saying it out loud, even to strangers on the internet. Because here is the thing about what is coming next in Rohn's philosophy. The part about why motivation is not actually the thing that saves you. It surprises almost everyone who hears it for the first time, and it might be the single most useful idea in this entire video. Let's start with the question Jim Rohn believed almost everyone gets wrong. Why do some people turn their lives around while others, who want it just as badly, stay stuck for years or even decades? His answer was not about intelligence, luck, background, or opportunity. His answer was about foundation. Rohn loved to compare a life to a building. You can paint the walls, hang new curtains, buy nicer furniture, and for a little while the place looks better. But if the foundation underneath is cracked, none of that surface level effort actually holds. Eventually the same problems resurface because you decorated the outside instead of repairing what was underneath. He argued that most people who feel stuck are not actually failing at life. They are failing at foundation, mindset, values, discipline, and daily habits. And no amount of surface-level motivation fixes a foundation problem. This is why he was famously skeptical of quick fixes and hype. He was not interested in getting you excited for one weekend. He was interested in you rebuilding something that would hold weight for the rest of your life. And that starts, he insisted, not with your circumstances, but with an honest look inward. Not blame, not shame, just honesty. What habit is quietly working against me? What decision have I been avoiding because it is uncomfortable? What would I have to admit is true if I stopped making excuses for just 5 minutes? These questions are uncomfortable on purpose. Rohn believed discomfort was often the doorway to real change, because comfort rarely asks anything of you, and growth almost always does. He used to point out that you do not usually need a completely different life to fix what feels broken. Most of the time, you need a different version of yourself inside the life you already have. Someone with a little more patience, a little more self-control, a little more courage to follow through on the things you already know you should be doing. One of the ideas he returned to again and again was this: your circumstances may explain where you are, but your daily decisions determine where you are going. That distinction matters enormously because it moves the entire conversation away from what happened to you and toward what you are choosing to do about it. It is not always fair. Rohn never claimed life was fair. What he claimed was that fairness was beside the point, because dwelling on it does not build anything, while taking responsibility does. He also had a particular way of talking about failure that separated him from teachers who tried to pretend failure did not matter or should not hurt. Rohn did not romanticize struggle. He simply refused to let it be the final word. Fail, he taught, but let it become education instead of identity. There is a real difference between saying, I failed at this, and saying, I am a failure. And he believed that difference alone determined whether someone eventually got back up or stayed down for good. What strikes so many people when they first encounter Rohn's teaching on this is how unglamorous it all sounds. There is no secret. There is no hack. There is only the decision to stop waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect resources, or the perfect version of yourself, and to instead start exactly where you are, with exactly what you have. But here is where his teaching gets genuinely surprising, because most people assume the next step is finding more motivation. Jim Rohn spent decades arguing almost the opposite. And once you understand why, you will never think about willpower the same way again. Motivation, Rohn argued, is one of the least reliable resources a person has. It shows up when things feel exciting, when a new goal is fresh, when a new year begins, or a new video lights a fire under you for an afternoon. And then, almost without exception, it fades. If you are relying on motivation to carry you through the boring, repetitive, unglamorous middle of any real change, he warned, you will quit long before the results ever show up. What replaces motivation, in his philosophy, is discipline. Not as a punishment, but as a form of self-respect. Discipline is what gets you up on the mornings you do not feel like it. Discipline is what keeps you going on the days when your progress feels completely invisible. Rohn was blunt about this. He did not believe you needed to feel like doing the work. He believed you needed to do the work regardless of how you felt, because feelings are unreliable. Narrators and results do not care about your mood. This is where his teaching becomes genuinely practical instead of just inspiring. He was famous for insisting that you do not need a dramatic overhaul to start rebuilding your life. You need small, repeatable actions. Read a few pages a day instead of trying to read 50 books this year. Move your body consistently instead of punishing yourself with a workout you will quit in 2 weeks. Wake up with a plan instead of letting the day happen to you. Keep the small promises you make to yourself, because Rohn believed that self-trust is built exactly the same way trust with another person is built, through a long track record of following through. He described this almost like compound interest, decades before that comparison became common in self-improvement circles. One good day will not transform your life. One workout will not transform your body. One productive afternoon will not transform your career. But hundreds of ordinary, disciplined days, stacked one on top of another, absolutely will. He wanted people to stop looking for the single dramatic moment that changes everything and instead trust the slow, quiet math of consistency. There is an emotional shift that happens here that Rohn talked about often, almost tenderly, for a man known for tough honesty. He said that your habits do not just produce results, they produce identity. If you repeatedly choose comfort, comfort becomes who you are. If you repeatedly choose discipline, discipline becomes who you are, almost without effort, because it has simply become familiar. That is genuinely good news for anyone who feels like their bad habits define them. It means new habits, repeated long enough, can just as easily become the new definition. He also had a particular fondness for the idea of intentional time, which he considered one of the most overlooked resources in modern life. Everyone gets the same 24 hours. The difference between people who rebuild their lives and people who stay stuck, he argued, is rarely the amount of time available. It is how deliberately that time gets used. Some people spend their days reacting to whatever demands their attention. Others decide in advance what actually matters and organize their hours around protecting it. If you have made it this far, here is something worth sitting with for a moment. Rohn believed that the version of you 5 years from now is already being shaped by decisions you are making today, whether or not you are paying attention to them. That is not meant to create pressure. It is meant to hand you the pen back. If this is starting to genuinely shift how you think about your own daily choices, do me a favor and hit like on this video. And if you know someone who has been quietly stuck lately, someone who could use exactly this reminder, send it their way. Sometimes the people who need this most are not the ones who ask for it. And there is one more layer of Rohn's teaching still ahead, the part he considered the actual root of lasting change. And it reframes almost everything we have talked about so far. Here is the layer of Jim Rohn's philosophy that tends to surprise people the most, because it is not really about productivity or habits at all. It is about identity, and specifically about the story you privately tell yourself about who you are and what you deserve. Rohn taught that confidence is not something you generate by giving yourself a pep talk in the mirror. Confidence, in his framework, is evidence-based. It comes from keeping promises to yourself over and over until you simply cannot deny the pattern anymore. One completed commitment becomes evidence. Another becomes confidence. Another becomes something closer to identity. Eventually, you start to see yourself differently, not because you decided to think more positively, but because you have actually proven something to yourself through repeated action. This is why he was skeptical of self-improvement advice that focused purely on mindset without action attached to it. He believed thoughts alone rarely change a person's trajectory. What changes a person is the accumulated evidence of small commitments kept, especially the ones nobody else ever sees. The early morning you got up anyway. The evening you chose to finish something instead of quitting. The moment you told yourself the truth instead of the comfortable lie. Rohn considered those private victories far more important than any public achievement, because they are the bricks the whole foundation gets built from. He also warned, quite pointedly, against a habit almost everyone falls into without realizing it, comparing your beginning to someone else's middle. Watching someone further along in their journey and measuring your day one against their year 10 is, in Rohn's words, one of the fastest ways to talk yourself out of even starting. Everyone begins from a different starting point, carrying different circumstances, different setbacks, different timing. Your responsibility was never to become someone else. It was only ever to become a stronger version of the person you already are. This is where his teaching offers something genuinely valuable if you are rebuilding after a difficult stretch. He did not ask people to erase their past or pretend it did not happen. He asked them to stop living in it. He used to describe the past like a rearview mirror, essential to glance at occasionally so you understand where you have been, useless and even dangerous to stare at constantly, because you cannot drive forward while your eyes are fixed behind you. Reflect long enough to learn the lesson. Then turn your attention back to the road ahead of you. If any part of this video has given you something real to think about, something worth actually acting on this week, I would ask you to do one simple thing. Share it with someone in your life who needs to hear it as much as you did. Not because it helps this channel, although it genuinely does, but because Rohn's entire philosophy was built on the belief that the right idea, delivered at the right moment, can change the direction of someone's whole life. You might be that moment for somebody today. And this next part is, in many ways, the hinge his entire philosophy turns on. The idea that ties discipline, identity, and time together into one single, deceptively simple truth about how real transformation actually happens, brick by brick, day by day, whether or not anyone is watching. Jim Rohn had a phrase he returned to constantly in various forms across decades of teaching. For things to change, you have to change. Not your circumstances first. Not your luck first. Not your environment first. You. He believed that most people spend far more energy trying to change what is happening around them than they spend trying to change what is happening within them. And that this backwards approach is exactly why so many people feel stuck, despite genuinely wanting something different. This did not mean he dismissed the real impact of hardship or unfair circumstances. He simply refused to let circumstance become the final explanation for a life that never moved forward. Your environment can influence you, he taught, but it does not have to define you, because you retain control over something far more powerful than your environment, your response to it. One of the most quietly profound things he taught was this: growth does not happen only on the easy days. It happens disproportionately on the days when continuing is hard. The morning you did not feel like getting up but got up anyway. The stretch of weeks when your progress felt completely invisible, yet you kept showing up regardless. Rohn believed those unglamorous, undocumented, unapplauded moments were doing far more work than any dramatic breakthrough ever could, precisely because nobody was watching and you did it anyway. He often used the image of a seed growing underground, developing roots long before anything visible breaks through the soil. Progress can work the same way in a person's life. You may be quietly building discipline, patience, and resilience for weeks or months before any of it becomes visible to you or to anyone else. That invisible period is not evidence that nothing is happening. It is usually evidence that something real is taking root. This is also where Rohn's teaching becomes genuinely emotional, not just practical. He believed that the small decisions nobody ever notices are often the exact decisions that end up defining a person's entire comeback. Not one dramatic event, not one lucky break. Thousands of ordinary decisions made quietly that eventually add up to a completely different life. The version of you 5 years from now will very likely look back and recognize that the turning point was never one single moment. It was a pattern of moments, repeated on purpose. If you are in a season right now where nothing seems to be visibly changing, Rohn's teaching offers something worth holding on to. That feeling is not proof of failure. It is often simply what growth looks like before it becomes visible. The temptation, understandably, is to interpret invisible progress as no progress at all, and to quit right before the results were finally about to surface. Patience, in his framework, was never passive. It meant continuing to work, continuing to learn, continuing to improve, even while waiting for outward proof that any of it mattered. There is one final piece of this philosophy still ahead, and it may be the most important idea in the entire video. The piece that ties everything together into a single, clear, and genuinely hopeful conclusion about what it actually means. If there is one idea Jim Rohn wanted people to walk away with above everything else, it is this: you do not need a perfect past to build a meaningful future. You do not even need to see the entire road ahead of you. You only need enough courage to take the very next step, and then the step after that, and then the one after that. This is, in many ways, the emotional center of everything we have covered. Rohn was never interested in perfection, because he understood perfection is not a realistic target for anyone. What he was interested in was participation. The simple, repeatable act of showing up for your own life, especially on the days it would be easier not to. He believed that consistency, not intensity, was the real engine behind lasting change, and that the people who eventually transform their lives are rarely the ones who tried hardest for one dramatic week. They are the ones who kept showing up long after everyone else, including their old selves, expected them to quit. If you take one thing from this breakdown of his teaching, let it be this: your past explains your current chapter, but it does not get to write the ending. That is still entirely your decision, made fresh every single morning. Forgive yourself for what you cannot change. Take full responsibility for what you can. Learn whatever the lesson was. And then, deliberately, turn your attention back toward the road ahead. Rohn spent his life trying to hand ordinary people something most of them had never been told directly: that they were not too far behind, not too old, not too damaged, and not too late. He believed the future belonged to anyone willing to build it one disciplined day at a time, regardless of how their story had gone so far. That message reached farmers and executives, young people and people well into their 60s and 70s, because the truth inside it never depended on age or circumstance. It only ever depended on the decision to begin. So if today is the day you decide to close one chapter and start writing the next one, you do not need a perfect plan and you do not need to have it all figured out. You need one habit chosen honestly. One important task completed instead of postponed. One useful thing learned instead of avoided. One small step taken today, followed by another tomorrow and another the day after that. Give the effort time to compound. Give your future an honest chance to look different from your past. That, more than any single quote or catchy phrase, is the real legacy Jim Rohn left behind. Not a shortcut, but a quiet, dignified reminder that ordinary people, making ordinary decisions consistently over time, are capable of extraordinary transformation. Your greatest achievement may never be proving anyone else wrong. It may simply be proving to yourself that you were capable of becoming more all along. The past is behind you. The future has not been written. And today is exactly where the two of them meet. If this breakdown of Jim Rohn's philosophy gave you something worth carrying into your own life, I would be genuinely grateful if you subscribed to this channel and turned on notifications so you never miss the next one. There are a lot of these lessons still worth exploring together, and I would love to have you here for what comes next. Until then, begin again, stay consistent, and keep becoming who you are capable of being.